Why do dudes like metal? It seems like a pretty simple question with a simple answer, right? Metal is manly. This technically isn't wrong. If I gave every example of a metal song or musician being manly, this video would be 42,069 hours long. Now, here's a slightly more difficult question. What does it mean to be manly? There are plenty of dudes on YouTube who've discussed this already, and more succinctly than I can, so we'll stick to manliness as it pertains to metal here. Is it the loudness, the intensity, the brazen fury and rage of testosterone fueled alpha males being channeled via phallic instruments? Or is it the utter psychological dominance of master musicians, flexing their artistic chops in a way feeble women couldn't dream of creating? Is it because boys like battle and girls like dolls, end of story? Or is it all three combined and much more? A result of the predominant social norms and expectations of men in a world historically dominated by men, intersecting with the awesome power of metal music. Social expectations of conquest, superiority, dominance, and general take what's mine attitude of masculinity didn't originate in metal, but it seemingly fits right at home in the unapologetically extreme atmosphere that is metal culture. Again, we can go through countless examples of this kind of traditional masculinity in metal, and there's a lot to be said as it pertains to women and non-men in the scene, but I wanted to start some dialogue as to our relationship with metal as men. As I just stated, I'm a man, and if I do say so, a generally traditionally manly man. I like to listen to metal way too loud at the gym while I pump iron. I like to blast metal while driving fast on a highway. I like gang choirs, and sometimes songs about sex, alcohol, violence, and pretty much anything associated with typical bravado-soaked machismo. Metal's association with shit like this makes it no surprise that today's red pillars and culture war veterans appreciate the utility it provides as hoe repellent or signifiers of indomitable strength, or just because it drowns out the repressed thoughts and memories of Linda. Oh, Linda. However, despite the protests of some metalheads, this is not the extent to which metal is capable of providing. Metal is awe-inspiring, entrancing, reality-altering, inspirational, spiritual, sometimes relaxing, and on and on and on and on. I'll listen to metal while blasting off, while gaming, while writing a script, or any number of things not associated with Arnold or King Leonidas. In other words, metal is so much more than the one use you or I happen to get out of it. Whether you like it or not, the boundless expanse of metal includes not only women and non-men, but also non-traditionally manly men. These people listen to and enjoy metal for some of the reasons you or I may, for the expression of pent-up emotion or for an extra push of motivation at the gym, but also for different reasons that you may not personally relate to, and that's okay. There is more than enough metal to go around. The question to be considered here is why traditional masculinity is so desperately clung to in metal circles, and why it almost feels natural, despite the aforementioned broad expanse of non-traditionally masculine sentiment present in metal. I have a whole video in progress discussing hair metal and its usage of femininity to perpetuate misogyny, as well as a video about sexism, homophobia, and gatekeeping, but it's necessary to bring up here the origins of heavy metal and the roots in the hyper-masculine rock of the 60s and 70s, evolving into the cesspool of misogyny that was the 80s metal scene and the sausage fest of today. Just take one look at any number of metal acts from this time period, read their lyrics and song titles, witness the tights bulging, and stories of sexual conquest that aren't even thought twice about now. It's just how it was. This is not limited to hair or glam metal, nor to the physical realm, as prog metal, for example, has a reputation of mental supremacy. The whole meme about proggers being pretentious is in large part related to owning the females with facts and logic. Also, that gang choir from earlier was from Brazilian extreme metal band Sarcófago, who have songs like Ready to Fuck alcoholic coma, and literally sex, drinks, and metal. Sarcophago was and is a huge influence on black, death, and extreme metal as we know it, whose fans and artists have a tendency to shit on materialistic glam metal quite a bit. In fact, it's not just metal that perpetuates this form of misogyny and hypermasculinity. You'd be hard pressed to find a single genre of music without it. Why is that? Patriarchy. The historical and societal expectation of men dominating is the foremost reason why our artistic expression contains such sentiment. Again, I refer you to any of these videos on the topic, but in short, under the normalcy of the patriarchy in which we live under, our existence as men is shaped and molded by these expectations of masculinity, not only out of our own willingness, but by the very societal pressure that requires a man to be a man. This pressure is violent, unabashed, and worst of all, entirely normal. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. To be a man is to, firstly, not be any of the qualities we deem non-manly. With all that being said, and referring back to the earlier examples of how well metal fits into traditional masculinity, in metal, these non-manly qualities are equated to non-metal qualities. The musical art form of metal is used as a litmus test to deduce who is a real man and who is not. Of course, this is all tied back to capitalism and its pervasive impact on society, favoring the ruthless, individualistic tendencies conducive to efficient profit accumulation, and discouraging any tendencies that may value human decency over said profit motive. It is no coincidence that these qualities deemed valuable and useful in our capitalistic society are the exact qualities we equate with masculinity. Bear with me for this abstraction, but these qualities are almost always coated in a rose-colored, nostalgic, and almost romantic shroud, reminiscing about the good old days when men were men, whether that be 1933 or 33. This is apparent in metal via the ancient decade of the 70s, the glorious golden age 80s, or the boundary-shattering 90s. But in my opinion, the late 80s, early 90s is the most nostalgically looked upon era of metal. This is all intertwined with the cultural shifts and trends of the 80s, where Reagan, consumerism, sweaty, hairy action heroes, and tight clothes made a lasting impression on yesteryear's metalheads all the way up to the present. I'm going to go deep into these topics and the 80s in particular in my next video, but the main point here is how our perception of masculinity is influenced by our romanticization of the past, and the glorious history of metal is a key part of why metal is associated with such historical masculine perceptions. Additionally, the fixation on injustice inflicted upon you by females, which are typically just injustices inflicted upon you by the alienating and hyper-competitive capitalistic dating market, is nothing but you complaining about the patriarchy while endorsing the patriarchy. I'm so sorry that Joe Bench didn't respond to your love letters. Much like political ideology, metal's extremity fosters extreme perceptions of masculinity. There is no denying the misogynistic and patriarchal utility metal exhibits, and has exhibited for decades now. This may be thought of in ways directly related to physical violence, but most of the time, the main results of these perceptions of masculinity is further alienation and isolation. Women may still be viewed as objects to dominate, but because you're not CeCe DeVille or John Bon Jovi, the act of domination loses its basis in reality and becomes Reddit manifestos or Sausage Fest Warhammer LAN parties. In other words, metal is some damn effective hoe repellent. I know a lot of metalhead men, including previously myself, who channel the misogynistic conquests of 80s metal or limitless fury of brutal death metal into emotional ammunition as to why they get fucked over by women, why today's feminazis suck, or just general reactionary gender wars sentiment. Not only is this the metal equivalent of the Shade Room and further escalates unnecessary tensions between gender warriors, but it makes it so that on the unlikely occasion you miraculously come face to face with a woman, your true brutal aura and intrusive thoughts of, "Psh, Taylor Swift isn't even within sniffing distance of Barrett," will again only repel the desperately sought after hose. The tricky part in this whole conversation is the undeniable sense of brotherhood metal has provided for countless men for decades, oftentimes directly bonding over the displays of over the top masculinity so prevalent in metal's history. Metal has incredible unifying potential, especially amongst alienated men, due to the aforementioned qualities of metal that we view as manly. This isn't a problem outright. In fact, it's a great and powerful thing. But when we look at the ways in which men seek acceptance from other men, and keep in mind how our patriarchal society affects these displays of masculinity, it's no surprise a genre brimming with hyperviolence, dominance, rage, and intensity are in fact the very same traits we associate with masculinity, to the point of equivalence. Men like metal because metal is manly. Why is it manly? All the things, stupid. Does this mean we need to neutralize all manly sentiment in metal, or eliminate topics like war altogether? Of course not. Should we think a little bit how our concepts of masculinity came to be and its inescapable linkage with metal? Absolutely. And it makes your subject matter a bit more profound when you dig deeper past sex and drinks. I don't pretend to have any easy answers or quick fixes, but at the very least, we can be conscious of the function it has in our patriarchal society, and that I personally don't find it very metal to serve as a tool for an exploitative system that appreciates the passive enforcement of norms like demeaning women and being aggressively homophobic. I also don't find it very metal to exclude those who love metal solely because of your attachment of metal to traditional masculinity. This attachment is inherently limiting and goes against the boundary pushing of metal, so crucial to its existence. Just as metal's deep connection with masculinity is undeniable, it's also undeniable that metal has a unique ability to unite drastically different people across many different backgrounds. Some may feel a surge of testosterone or imagine themselves as an action hero, whereas others may get blown away by the profoundness of the horrors of war. The two beat might be good to drink some beers to, but others may find the rhythmic structure sonically satisfying. My point is, metalheads have always been able to bond over metal, despite endless fractures and schisms. As metalheads, we should embrace this bond and discard the constraints of patriarchy, especially given its utility by an oppressive capitalist socio-economic order. Just as metal isn't limited to traditional masculinity, masculinity itself isn't limited to the John Wayne variety. I think it's pretty manly for a man to have empathy, patience, compassion, and understanding. I don't think our potential great physical strength should be limited to violence and abuse. I don't think the aggression and intensity of metal should be directed at those less fortunate than myself. I don't find satisfaction in dominating those who are dominated every single day under the system of oppression none of us had a say in being brought into. It's not even limited to protecting the damsels in distress. How many times have you heard death and black metal fans go at it just because one views the other as less manly, and therefore less metal? Who cares if you're an emaciated true culter, a cargo short-wearing death head, or a massive unit of a crowbar fan? The subgenre you self-identify with has no effect on your T count, and the amount of compression in your mix doesn't correlate with your bulge dimensions. I'm just some dude who likes metal, and chances are, you are too. There's nothing inherently wrong with lifting weights, liking cars, action movies, growing your beard, or listening to loud, heavy music. In my opinion, we should welcome those who love metal, discourage unneeded misogynistic hatred, and then proceed to headbang. It has nothing to do with making metal PC or whatever the fuck else you're thinking. It's about metalheads loving metal and not putting up with our unnecessary cultural taboos and norms. If you understand metal's vastness and realize the immense strength it has in its enormity, you should appreciate those who, despite the seemingly insurmountable odds of patriarchy and capitalistic gender wars, still arrive to the point of metalheaddom, requiring only a genuine enjoyment of this powerful genre. Hating just to hate will only further alienate yourself from a true metal community, and in turn, feeds the hatred you didn't even ask for to begin with. Some sad misanthropes may be okay with that, but I kinda like having a romantic partner and real life interaction in tandem with listening to extreme metal. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you enjoy the quicker style videos. I have a couple big projects in the works, but I don't know, sometimes I like throwing out smaller but still under discussed topics such as this one. I'm also probably going to talk about masculinity as it pertains to metal again in the future, so think of this as a part one, I guess. Also, let me know if you want to start seeing chest days.